A very good afternoon to the viewers and listeners, and welcome to another edition of the Government Information Center. This is a platform where we bring you very important discussion regarding the government plans and activities. We are coming to you live from the GIC studios here in Eros, and in today's studio I'm joined by a panel of experts in the ICT sector. I'm joined by Ms. Linda Aipinge, who is the Director in the Information and Communication Development, that is in the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. I'm also joined by Ms. Emilia Nkembwa. She is the Chief Executive Officer at the Communication Regulatory Authority of Namibia, and also joined by Ms. Robin Kleinhans. She is a Chief Legislative Drafter at the Directorate of Legislative Draft in the Ministry of Justice. But before we get into today's topic, which is going to be on Namibia's ICT laws and policies in perspective, let us give the chance to our dear Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Health and Social Services, Dr. Kalumbi Shangula, to give us today's COVID update. Dr. Good afternoon. The podium is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. Good afternoon, esteemed panelists. Good afternoon, fellow Namibians. I will give the update for the 6th of April 2022, that is yesterday's. We have received 657 results in the last 24 hours reporting cycle, and out of those, 19 have tested positive for COVID-19, representing 2.9% positivity ratio. Among them are 10 females and 9 males. The age range from 2 years to 91 years. They are as follow: Comas 11, all from Windhoek. Ochodonjupa 4, with Okahanja and Ochiwarango recording 2 each. Hangwena 3 from Angela and 1 from Karas in the district of Luderitz. Among the confirmed cases, 9 are learners, 1 is a student, and 1 is a health worker. 6 of them are fully vaccinated. 1 has received a booster dose, and the remainder 13 are not vaccinated. We have recorded 7 recoveries, all from Zambezi regions. The number of active cases is now 246. 14 are currently hospitalized in 6 regions, and we do not have any patient in the ICU. One of the hospitalized cases have received 1 dose of COVID-19 vaccine, and the remainder 13 are not vaccinated. We have not recorded any death during the period under review. By the 5th of March 2022, the total number of 448,394 people who are aged 18 and above have received 1 dose of COVID-19 vaccine, representing 30.5% of the adult target population. 132,874 have received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, while 258,070 have received 2 doses of other vaccine types. Consequently, 390,944 adults have completed their vaccination schedule, translating into 26.6% of the adult target population. A total of 128 individuals have received component 1 of Sputnik V vaccine. 76 have received component 2 of the same vaccine. So a total of 204 doses of Sputnik vaccine were administered. 15,148 children aged 12 years and 17 have received one dose of the Pfizer vaccine, representing 5% of the target population. Of these, 5,884 are fully vaccinated. Hence, the cumulative number of people vaccinated with the first dose of COVID-19, both adults and children, is 463,542, of which 396,828 are fully vaccinated, translating into 22.3% of the total target population. 45,986 people have received a COVID-19 vaccine booster dose. In terms of summary, currently the cumulative number of newly infected confirmed individuals stand at 157,825 since the beginning of the pandemic. Total number of recovery now stand at 155,652, translating into 97.3 recovery rate. The total number of deaths due to COVID proper 3,690, and we have 330 who are registered as COVID-related deaths, giving us a total number of individuals who died as a result of COVID-19, 4,020. Total samples tested so far 988,662. The number of individuals currently in quarantine stand at 144. This concludes today's COVID-19 update, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalumbi Shangula, the Minister in the Ministry of Health and Social Services, for today's COVID update. Thank you so much. Now, to get into today's business, we are discussing the Namibia's ICT laws and policies in perspective. And if you have just joined us, we are joined in the studio by experts in the ICT sector. I'm joined by Ms. Linda Aipinge, who is the Director of ICT in the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. She's seated right next to me on my left-hand side. Good afternoon, Melinda.
Good afternoon.
And welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right. Seated in the middle is Ms. Robin Kleinhans. She is the Chief Legislative Drafter at the Directorate of Legislative Drafting in the Ministry of Justice. Good afternoon and welcome.
Afternoon, Sia.
Right.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, we are joined by Ms. Emilia Ngikembwa. She is the Chief Executive Officer at the Communication Regulatory Authority of Namibia. Ms. Ngikembwa, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right. To get into today's discussion, the sector plays a major role as an enabling environment for information, communication, and technology. The ICT laws and policy formulation have significant impact on citizens' lives and livelihood. However, the sector requires enabling legislative and policy framework to thrive. So I would want to start with Ms. Aipinge, who is the Director of ICT in the Ministry of Information, to give us an overview of some of the ICT laws and policies in place and what are their intentions.
Thank you very much. At the creation of the Ministry of ICT, which was then the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, the various laws and policies have been developed. And I would start with the Communications Act Act of 2009. The Act aims at regulating the ICT sector and also establishing the regulatory communication regulatory authority of Namibia, which is then given the powers and function to regulate the sector. When I talk about the regulation of the ICT sector, I talk about postal, broadcasting, and telecommunication. In terms of the policies that we have in place, we also have the ICT policy, the overarching ICT policy, which covers broadcasting, postal, and telecommunication. And the purpose of this policy is basically to set a framework for the development of the postal, telecommunication, and broadcasting. One of the laws that was passed recently is the Electronic Transactions Act, and really to provide for electronic transactions in the country. It allows for the promotion of electronic transactions in the country. This law is operational, but there are 3 provisions that are not operational as yet. There is an advisory council that has to be appointed by the Honorable Minister of ICT, and the process is ongoing. There is also the provision on electronic signature that is not operational, waiting the appointment of the advisory council to advise the minister on the regulations on how to deal with those with electronic signature. The other one, also pending the the advisory council, is the online consumer affair, the committee that has to be established by the council to ensure that our stakeholders or our users are protected. We also have the national broadband policy. And this policy basically sets the minimum standard in terms of the quality of service or the speed that you should expect from the operators that are regulated by the regulator. I think I can end there for now. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Ipinge, Ms. Ipinge, you have mentioned a couple of policies that influence the ICT sector in terms of the development of the ICT sector and so forth. I would want to move to Ms. Nkembwa, the CEO of CRAN. Ms. Nkembwa, what role does CRAN play in implementing these laws and policies that, for instance, Ms. Ipinge mentioned here?
The role that CRAN plays is really policy implementation. What we do as a regulator, we encapsulate the government policies into a regulatory framework, which is made up primarily by the dictates of the Communications Act, but we then also take guidance from the policies that the ministry has put in place. So far, I think until the end of last year, our implementation model has been that of administrative licensing, where we then bring in the players into the regulatory framework by giving them the requisite licenses that they need in order to provide for services. But what we have started doing over the past 6 months is to focus our attention from just mere licensing, but also to looking at those policy provisions that would create impact within the industry, either for the consumer in order to raise the correct benefits and to ensure that prices are affordable, there is accessibility, there is good quality of service, and also by making sure that the environment is fertile for the operators to continue providing the services. And we then do this by ensuring that those that are dominant are not abusing their dominance, and also by removing any barriers to market entry and any other restrictive business practices that may be in the industry, which is impacting the industry negatively. So our role really is to translate those government policies into tangible benefits, not only for the consumers, but also for the operators that we regulate.
All right. Now, if you have just joined us, You can be part of this discussion. Perhaps if you want to pose your question, you can join this discussion on our Ministry of Information and Communication Technology Facebook platform. Our handle on Facebook is Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. You can post your questions there, then we will attend to them. And at 1:30, we'll also open our lines so that you can take part in this discussion. You can call in the number in the studio is 061 400 397. That is when you want to be part of this discussion telephonically. Now, moving on, Ms. Kleinhans, being a legislative drafter is one of the critical areas that the Ministry of Justice play for all government or organization, ministries and agencies. That includes Ministry of Information. Can you take us through the process, can you take us through the process, how it is like, and what are the expectations of the Ministry of Justice overall?
All right, thank you. I actually do think that the majority of the nation and people have a misconception about where us as the legislative drafters, where we lie in the chain when it comes to the legislative process. The legislative process is guided by a 1993 cabinet directive. And the first thing that a line ministry needs to do if they want to introduce new legislation is to approach the Office of the Attorney General. And they need to present it to the Office of the Attorney General to determine whether or not there may be any constitutional barriers to the proposed legislation or whether there might be any hindrances from existing legislation. Now, before they even do that, the line ministries need to actually have a well-developed policy in place, which is the foundation for legislation. If the policy in itself is not well developed and well researched and well put together, then the legislation that comes out of it doesn't really have legs to stand on, right? So as the process goes, it goes to the Attorney General. The Attorney General then decides yay or nay. Then if the Attorney General decides yay, it can go ahead. Then it goes into the process of developing its documents, an explanatory memorandum, getting a layman draft set up, and then presenting it to CCL, which is the Cabinet Committee on Legislation. And they will then go through it to determine whether it's on the right path, whether it does answer issues of policy, whether it answers a mischief, whether it deals with a mischief that needs to be dealt with. And then CCL will then decide whether or not it must go back to the line ministry or whether it can be presented to the cabinet for its approval in principle. Now, cabinet also, it does not go through the draft bill or the draft legislation in detail. It just approves it on principle. And once it is approved on principle, only after that will it come to our directorate, and then we would need the draft bill, we would need the policy documents, we would need the explanatory memorandum, we would need CCL minutes, if any, and we will need the cabinet approval. And then we start working.
Now, Ms. Kleinhans, my apologies. You mentioned that legal drafting is quite a process. Roughly, how long does it take, the time frame to finish drafting these policies?
All right, well, it depends on what we have on our table. So legislation can be anything from a bill, which will become an act of parliament, regulations, which is in terms of an act of parliament. Then we have government notices, and we have proclamations, right? And general notices. Okay, so let's quickly deal with general notices. General notices is delegated legislation from local and regional authorities. So if a municipality or a town council, if they want a set of regulations to deal with an issue within their town, then they will send instructions, and that'll be a general notice that we deal with. So we have specific timeframes for each of these different pieces of legislation. Our timeframe is that we want to finalize a bill within 6 months. These are maximum timeframes. 6 months for a bill, 4 months for a set of regulations, 15 days for a government notice, and then 5 days for a proclamation, which must be signed by the president.
Now, moving on, I would want to get to you, Ms. Ipinge. The Ministry of Information and Communication is currently working on several bills and policies. Can you kindly state some of them that you are currently working on, and shed light on how is the process like in developing these bills and policies, and what impact do they have on the men on the street?
Thank you very much. As I've mentioned earlier, that we have the Communications Act of 2009. You know, technology moves at a very fast pace. We are busy reviewing that Communications Act to ensure that it accommodates the emerging trends. That is one. Secondly, I've also mentioned the postal telecommunication as well as the broadcasting policies. They are also outdated, and we have done an assessment to determine to what extent we have implemented this policy since 2009. We've gone through the process of National Planning Commission, because National Planning Commission does the quality assessment, and in terms of the quality assessment, they have given us a go-ahead, and then we got also the cabinet directive. So we have a report that indicates how far we have implemented the policies, and also that is giving us then the go-ahead for us to review and consolidate one ICT policy. The other one that we are also busy with, we have you would all know that we are advocating for connectivity. Now, when you advocate for connectivity, people are connected through various devices. It could be your computer, it could be your laptop, or it could be your mobile phone. We have noted that although the Environmental Management Act provides for the disposal of solid waste, there was a gap for us to actually manage the waste. And now what we have done, or what we are doing, we have included the component of both electronic and electrical equipment, and we have developed a policy that is due for adoption by cabinet. In fact, it was discussed at cabinet, and it was referred to a special cabinet committee on treasury. So the impact there is really to make sure that we do away with the barriers in terms of the environmental impact of these devices that can be dumped everywhere. You would know that, for example, in local authorities, that you find so many dumping sites where both solid and electronic or electrical equipment is dumped. So we want really to make sure that the waste is managed in a more professional manner. And also the issue of your air conditioner, the electronic equipment, or your bulbs. So this is one of the policies that we are busy with. In terms of the bills also that are quite critical, one is the cybercrime bill. We all know that cybercrime is borderless. It affects all of us. We are busy with the cybercrime bill that really to regulate that space, and also to create offenses and penalties for those that are not complying with that particular bill when it becomes a law. We also are busy with the personal data protection bill, really to ensure that your personal data out there is protected. When you give your data to somebody, let's say you open an account at a particular shop, we're placing obligations on those controllers of your data to ensure that they are held liable should anything happen. So these are some of the bills and policies that we are busy with as a ministry at the moment. And the impact is really like I indicated for cybercrime, that we want our citizens to be protected. We also want those that are committing such crimes to be brought to book. Thank you.
Ms. Ipinge, you mentioned earlier that you have a couple of bills and policies that you are currently working on as a ministry. I would want you to to put it to us as to how is the process like? Is it a cumbersome process as Ms. Kleinhans has just said that it takes a little bit of time, for instance, from the perspective of a legal drafter? How is it from your end as the ministry in terms of formulating these policies and bills?
So what we do, like my colleague has said here, is that we facilitate various approvals at various levels. Like what we have done, we go to cabinet, and cabinet gives us that approval in principle. We've also gone to the cabinet committee on legislation, especially, Amelia, let me talk about the cybercrime bill that has been on the card for a long time. The process is quite long. One would know that the cybercrime bill was together with electronic transactions, and then the electronic transactions was passed. The cybercrime was separated from the electronic transactions, and it really came a long way. I must really, with a heavy heart, also mention that the process was also prolonged by the fact that one of our drafters, one of our experienced drafters who have been part of the process, has passed on last year. And that has really put a setback, and may his soul rest in peace.
That's bad.
A setback in drafting, but I'm glad that my colleague from Ministry of Justice have been assigned now to take over, has taken over, and we are really hoping that by June, the two colleagues that are assigned will be able to submit the draft that will then subject for public consultation, because in all this we need to consult the stakeholders. In terms of the data protection, it came also a long way. It went through cabinet. It's a process. It went through the cabinet committee on legislation last October. The cabinet committee on legislation actually assigned again the two colleagues that are assigned for the data cybercrime to help us perfect this bill. So we had a working session in early March where the Ministry of Justice and ourselves, and also a few stakeholders, just to look at what the comments of the Cabinet Committee on Legislation has actually highlighted, which were also subject to the public consultation. It's really also unfortunate that one can have your own target in terms of saying, I want to finish this bill in this particular time. But we have had experiences where, because you depend on the approval or a go-ahead from another institution, it takes really time. But we are hoping that by around June, we have those drafted bills, and then we then redraft it. Then we then go to back to the Cabinet Committee on Legislation, and eventually also to consult the stakeholders. Thank you.
Right. That was very educating. Ms. Ngikembwa, coming to you from a grand perspective. Ms. Ipinge have mentioned earlier a couple of bills and policy that the ministry is currently busy with. So from a perspective of CRAN, when it comes to policies and bills, what is the role that CRAN plays, and how is the process like in developing and implementing these policies?
Okay, so obviously, in terms of the hierarchy, the ministry is the policy maker, and the minister is also the one that is responsible for legislation as far as the industry is concerned. So as regulator, we are merely then consulted as part of that rulemaking process, or as part of that legislative process. We will give our input, obviously from an industry perspective, and also given the insight and the intelligence that we would have about the industry. And after the consultation process is finalized and the ministry has then gone through the process that was earlier explained by both my colleagues, we will then receive the policy or the law back for implementation. Now, what we do then is we formulate regulations under those acts that we are responsible for. I think as regulator, we have a unique setup where we are allowed to pass our own regulations without necessarily going through the drafter's office. And once we have then formulated those regulations, at times we also cascade them down into conditions that we impose on the operators that we are regulating, and that is how then the policy initiatives are translated throughout the industry.
As the regulators of policies and bills, do you perhaps give your input to government or to the ministry in itself to say that certain policies that you are formulating, they are good or they are bad for in terms of the consumers?
Indeed, because you see, when you regulate in the public interest, which means that whatever policies and whatever interventions you are putting in place, you must ensure that they will generate benefits or interest for the consumers. Now, the tricky thing with regulation is that you want to be proactive, especially when you regulate a technology-driven industry. You want to be proactive in creating innovation in the industry. So you always want to be on the lookout for those particular innovative ways in which you can then formulate the policies. But at the same time, then you also have to be responsive to the needs of the industry and ensure that those needs are then translated into policies. The other issue is that the policies are not just for the operators. The policies are also at government level. And we all know that the ICT sector is an economic enabler. So it is also our responsibility as a regulator to ensure that we are implementing those policies that would lead to the entire country benefiting from ICT being the economic enabler that it is.
Right, thank you so much for that. Ms. Ipinge, you have mentioned earlier about the drafting of the data protection and cybercrime bills. When are these bills likely to be finalized?
Thank you very much. Like I've indicated, it's very good to set targets, but sometimes from our lessons we realize that with drafting, it becomes a bit of a challenge to have the clear targets because of other processes that are involved. I mean, I look, for example, the drafters that are assigned to us, and the reality is that they are understaffed in terms of the Ministry of Justice. What they're doing, they're assisting us at the moment, and they're doing that after hours. It's like not on your normal working hours. And that is a challenge that like I indicated, but what we are hoping for is that at least by June, we will be able then to have these documents from them, that then we will be able then to consult the stakeholders, and then we'll have to take these bills back again to the Cabinet Committee on Legislation, because the Cabinet Committee on Legislation, or CCL, directed us that we go back and we look at these bills. So by June, we will be able to, but our hope is that during this financial year, we really should be able to sign this off. These are the bills that have come a very long way, and the nation is waiting, especially for your cybercrime, that the crimes are being committed and the public out there is crying.
Ms. Kleinhans, Ms. Ipinge mentioned the bottlenecks that are coming from the side of legal drafters, that is from the Ministry of Justice. Then my next question to you, perhaps maybe I know it's going to be a question that could fit to be asked to the HR officer, but I would want you to give us your view. She mentioned that some of the hindrance to completion of these bills and so forth, it's because the Ministry of Justice is understaffed in regards to the legal drafters. What could be the reason? Don't we have expertise in the country?
See, to be honest, right, we are a small directorate, we are understaffed, but it's not so much about the number of staff members, it's about the capacity. Now, I've been with the directorate about 9 years now, and I've been told by others that I need to embrace the fact that I am a specialist. But I don't feel that way yet, because I still feel like I have so much to learn. Now, as Ms. Ipinge said, we lost Mr. Willem Becker, Advocate Becker, last year due to COVID, and he was this treasure trove of knowledge and of experience. And when he passed, unfortunately, he took all of that with him. And thus, it created a little bit of a vacuum. But we do try to work as a team so that we can fill the gaps for one another, where we each feel that we have a gap in our capacity. But honestly, it does take a long time to really be an expert in your craft when you're a legislative drafter, because you have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to the law, right? So that you can be the master of one.
Great.
And so that is basically a little bit of what our issue is that we're also, if you look at our average age, we're a young directorate. So we're all still very much, we learn as we go. It's one of those specialties where you learn as you go. As you become more experienced, you become better at it. Referring to the two drafts that Ms. Apinge mentioned, I am personally also involved with both the cybercrime and data protection. Cybercrime, yes, we do have our target of June, but as myself and my colleague are working on it, we foresee that we will have to have a consultation with the ministry within the next couple of weeks, because as we're going through it, we're like, we have questions. And that's often what happens when we sit with a bill. We go through the bill and we're like, we have questions.
Right. Thank you so much, Robin. Now, while we are at cyber issues, Ms. Apinge, I'm coming to you on that. I would want to inform our viewers and listeners, those that are watching on various platforms, be it listening on radio or television. You can join this important discussion here in the studio by calling on the number 061-400-397, or you can join our social media page, which is the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology. You post your question there, then we should be able to pose them to the ICT experts that we have today in the studio here. I understand we have a caller online. Caller, good afternoon. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Caller, good afternoon.
All right. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please go ahead, Thomas.
Wonderful. My question is directed to the panel. It may be more the ministry and CRAN that could be the one affected by the question, but I'd really love them to answer it in a concise manner and really give it some thought. The ICT industry, we know that you cannot bring ICT if there is no electricity in a rural village, rural what have you. That's where the technology needs to get to. Now, we know that current industry, and we also know that the funding within the industry is mostly 70% private individual companies, you know, the heavyweights in the industry and all that, the ICTs and so. And they are doing their best to do what they can to take ICT technology out there, make it available, make it in the hands of the consumer and so on. The consumer may be located in the rural areas, wherever they are located. Now, in those rural areas, you feel that you have a lot of electricity shortage, and that is regulated by another regulator, ECB, and is funded through a different mechanism, which is also having a similar, maybe 30-70%, 70 private, and then 30%, that's where government really comes in terms of getting it out there. So what you get is a gap between these two industries, but they need to work together to actually deliver the final result. In terms of strategy, what is our 5-year plan in closing that gap, harmonizing that gap, or having the two teams sit in the same room, or align the funding to speak to the same problem? I would really love to get some answers, or maybe have someone think about it and come back to us and give us answers. That's really what I'd like to put across.
All right. Thank you so much, Thomas, for your contribution. Your question is well noted.
All right, so thank you.
Right. Before we take that question, dear panelists, I would want to come to you, Ms. Apinge. We were just speaking on issues of cyber issues, and the cabinet has recently approved the national cyber security strategy and awareness creating plan. Can you briefly talk us through this strategy with special focus on aims and objective and what is expected?
Yeah, thank you very much. With the absence of the cybercrime law, we have, as government, recognized the need for us to have a targeted focus in terms of cybersecurity. I've mentioned that cybercrime is borderless, and we need to ensure that we come up with the targeted intervention. So it's really for that reason that we then developed the National Cybersecurity Strategy and Awareness Creation Plan. The Council of Europe actually was in the country, and they've helped us, but in other words, the final product that went to cabinet was the function of the interministerial or interorganizational committee that then put this work together. What we're trying to do is really to, like I said, a targeted or coordinated manner to ensure that there are 4 pillars actually, if I can mention, to say the first pillar is for the strategy looks at the enabling legislative framework. And this includes your cybercrime bill and also your data protection laws that have to be in place. The second one is on capacity. We know that we need to build capacity, especially on law enforcement and also, dealing with these cybercrimes. The third one is basically on international, actually national, regional, and also international cooperation. I can't emphasize this also to mention that cybercrime is borderless, and we need to really work together in ensuring that we are coordinating. And I must really also mention that there are various stakeholders that have expressed interest in helping government in terms of that, the coordination or the cooperation. But I'll touch that in the next point, which is the 4th pillar, then this is awareness creation. What we really have noted is that, yes, we don't have a law in place, but when you look at the crimes that are committed, it's by individuals. And if I always give this example, like especially with awareness that as an individual, you know very well that you are not expecting a parcel from DHL, as an example, and you receive a link, and you click on that link, that can compromise your network or the network of your employer. And that is what we have realized. Or if you have never entered any competition and you see a message that comes through that says play along, and you play along. So that is it's a serious concern. So that's why we are saying we need to educate the public to really take responsibility and be aware of the danger of cybercrime and the importance of cybersecurity. To that end also, we have stakeholders that came on board. I think you have noted Karen also has been running various sessions on consumer awareness with regards to the cybercrime or cybersecurity. We also had one of the organizations, South Essential IT, that has come on board, and also to really make sure that we are putting that message out there, because we want to cooperate and do this in a coordinated manner. I'm also happy to announce that I think tomorrow as a ministry we'll be having our session with our ministerial staff just to educate us, because we can be the risks to our networks. So we are planning on launching the strategy and awareness creation plan, and we're also planning to have a separate session just to talk about the strategy and awareness creation plan. But briefly, that is all I can mention for now.
All right. Thank you for that, Ms. Ipinge. Now, I would want to move to the next question, although I also want to take you on to the next question that was posed by the caller. The caller alluded that Namibia has issues of ICT network coverage, especially at grassroots level. And now this brings me to the next question that I wanted to ask as to what are you doing as the ministry to ensure that you populate the ICT coverage, especially at grassroots level, more especially at a time when the country is battling of COVID-19. Learners were starting to embrace the use of ICT and all those sort of things, but then schools that are at in villages, grassroots level, they are finding it very hard to connect to ICT facility, especially internet. What are you doing as a ministry in terms of the long-term plans?
Yeah, thank you very much. As I've highlighted, we have the Communications Act, but maybe before I even get to the Communications Act, I would like to really just state that as a ministry or as a directorate responsible for ICT development, we don't receive funding for any capital investment or for us to roll out this infrastructure. The infrastructure that is rolled out there is by either your government entities, operators, or the private entities. That is quite key. Is the role that we play is to create an enabling environment. I've mentioned the Communications Act. In terms of the Communications Act, there is part 4 that deals with the Universal Service Fund. And this is the fund actually aimed at bridging the digital gap between urban and rural areas. CRAN has put in place the regulations. The ministry also has put in place the Universal Access Service Policy, and they are all aimed at accessibility, affordability, accessibility and affordability and all that. And we also have, I mentioned to you, the National Broadband Policy. And the National Broadband Policy that sets the minimum standard in terms of the speed that you would expect from the operators that are regulated by CRAN. So our role is that of creating that enabling environment, of ensuring that we put the laws and policies in place so that those that are in the business can then be guided by these laws and policies. If they are not complying, the regulator is there as an independent body to ensure that they are dealt with regards to the provisions of the law. So that is really that I can mention.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for that. We have a question from our social media platform that is asked by Bravo Maria. She's asking, why is the representation of the ministries not much seen in remote areas? Only in suburb where you can see the ministry. I think that is now in reference to ICT infrastructure in grassroots level, and that is exactly what you have just explained now. I would want to move to Ms. Nikembwa, and I want you to put it briefly because we are running out of time. So as part of CRAN's key focus area, which is to facilitate the adoption of technological innovation in the ICT sector, what are some of the key highlights that CRAN has facilitated so far?
I think the most important activity that we have had is the Universal Access Fund. So what CRAN has done is we have a GIS system where we have mapped the country and we have also mapped the telecommunications grid. And we know where the gaps are and we know which areas have service and which areas do not have service. When you look at population coverage as a country, we are sitting at around 80%, which is a good number. But then when you zoom into the regional representation, you'll find that places like Commerce, Erongo, Oshana are doing very well. But when you move into places like the Kunene, the two Kavangos, Ohangwena, and the Zambezi region, you would find that population coverage is around 33%, which means that we have a lot of gaps, especially in the remote areas. The other item that the gap analysis has revealed is that we have around 1,800 schools in the country, but only 400 of those schools actually have data connectivity. And we are not even talking about connectivity where the entire school is connected. It's probably an ADS, a line that goes into the principal's office or so. So for us as regulator, the concern is really that the schools and the remote areas, the clinics, and all the community centers where people come together are actually not connected to telecommunication services. The second issue is that, as Ms. Ipinga mentioned this earlier, government does not do any capital investments into the ICT sector. The entire rollout is left to the operators, but the operators are business entities that are there to make a business case and to make a profit. And we want to applaud our operators because as part of There are social responsibilities in certain instances because of the license conditions that we have imposed as CREN. They have gone out into the remote areas, but it is not enough and it's not happening at a good pace in order for us to ensure that we have coverage. So what the Universal Service Fund is then supposed to do is to collect money so that we can then provide coverage and access to those areas that do not have services. But the dilemma that we have had is that for the past 10 years, the section that would enable us to collect the levy for the fund has been caught up in litigation, and we have been unable to collect money, and this is why the fund is sitting empty for about 10 years, and the schools are sitting without connectivity, the clinics are sitting without connectivity. And what we are doing now is really to try and engage our relevant stakeholders, including government, to see how we can start collecting money into the fund and hopefully be able to bridge that gap that we currently have.
All right, Ms. Nkembwa, if I heard from you correctly, you have mentioned a lack of resources, which is funds, that are hampering you to implement some of the laws and policies in ICTs. Would you perhaps maybe allude to us as to, are there any other challenges that you are facing in developing and implementing these ICT laws so that they change the lives of Namibians, especially in the ICT sector? Briefly, please, the time is not on our side.
I think there's two issues that I would want to highlight. The first one is that it's not enough for you to have access to telecommunication services. They must be affordable and the quality of service must be right. We've recently just done a study where we saw that comparing Namibia to other countries in the SADC and the African continent, our data prices are very expensive, and that has become a barrier to connectivity because not everyone can afford to buy the services that that the operators are selling. The second issue is that you would find that you have village A and there is an operator that is providing services in that village. But the next village has no connectivity, but operators do not want to share infrastructure. So now you'll find one village has 2 towers of 2 different operators. But the next village has 0 towers. And our position as regulator has been that operators must start sharing infrastructure. Because if you can share 1 tower in one village, then the second one will not be duplicated, but it will then be taken to the next village to ensure that there is then coverage and connectivity.
All right, Ms. Nkembwa, I know you have so much to explain to the Namibian, especially in regards to the laws and policy in the ICT sector. But briefly, any message that you would want to leave with the viewers and listeners for today?
I think the message for us as regulator is just that we are going to implement the policy mandate that government has given us, and our primary focus in the next 12 months would be to bring down the price of data and to ensure that we increase access and connectivity.
All right, Ms. Aipinge, briefly, please.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I would just like to thank you for having us. I think this will be continuing discussions for really us to get into the details of what we have mentioned today, because time is not on our side, but I think we have a lot that we need to share. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Kleinhans, your final words?
Yeah, no, just thank you for having us and for giving us the opportunity to explain a little bit about the insanity that we go through every day.
All right. Thank you so much for those thoughtful words that you have just shared with us, and thank you so much, ladies, for joining us in GIC studio for today. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our discussion for today. We had very good experts in the ICT sector that joined us to unpack and dissect the topic around the Namibia's ICT laws and policy in perspective. From me, Hosi Dipo, your host for today's session, and our production crew, have a blessed day ahead and see you again Monday.